Welcome to Wireless LAN Weekly, a podcast focused on the wireless networking professional. We aim to educate, inform, entertain, and inspire. Get ready to listen and enjoy. Now to our host of the show, Keith Parsons.
Welcome again to episode number 12 of Wireless LAN Weekly. We're glad you could come and join us today. Today, our first topic is running wireless at a university scenario. And this is brought to us by Max Lopez over at the University of Colorado. Glad to have Max join us today. And in our second half, we have financial coach Derek Sisterhen. And Derek will be talking to us about how to get yourself out of that financial rut you might find yourself in. And we're glad that Derek was able to join us. So now, on with the show.
Today's wireless networking definition from the CWNP Dictionary of Wireless Terms and Acronyms.
Multicast. Multicast addressing is a network technology for the delivery of information to a group of destinations simultaneously using the most efficient strategy to deliver the messages over each link of the network only once, creating copies only when the links to the multiple destinations split. Now, typically, multicast refers to IP multicast, which is quite often employed for streaming media, push-to-talk, music on hold, or internet television applications.
Rant, pet peeve, what really bugs you? 60 seconds of complaining starts now.
Hi, my name's Dave Coleman, and my WLAN pet peeve, probably my biggest one, is one that a lot of people share with me, and that's when vendors say, you don't have to do a site survey. And most of the major WLAN vendors, not to name any by name, but almost all of them like to tell their customers that a site survey is not needed because you can use the dynamic RF solution that particular WLAN vendor has. Each WLAN vendor has their own dynamic RF solution. There's advantages and disadvantages to dynamic RF. But to tell a customer that you do not need to do a site survey to just deploy the APs in a grid pattern and turn on dynamic RF is a very foolish thing to say, especially if you plan on doing a voice deployment. I'm a big believer in site surveys, whether they're projection site surveys, modeling site surveys, and validation site surveys. Just deploying APs and turning down dynamic RF is not a good solution.
Things every wireless LAN professional needs to know. Gear up, buckle down, and stand by for the real techie stuff.
Hello again, this is Keith Parsons. Today I'm with Max Lopez. Max is a senior wireless engineer with the University of Colorado. He's in charge of their wireless LANs design and deployment that's going on there. And today we'll be talking about the challenges that face wireless administrators in a university environment. So, Max, welcome.
Thank you, Keith. Glad to be here. I'll start by providing a little perspective and a very high-level overview of the university's wireless network over here at Boulder. Here at the University of Colorado, we have approximately 2,300 802.11 ABG access points. They cover roughly 9 million square feet of campus. We do currently have 802.11n in a pilot phase, and we anticipate migrating this technology into a production environment here very soon. Now, we have a student populace of almost 40,000, of which we see 8,400 wireless connections a day. We actually had a survey that was conducted, and it concluded that an estimated 4 devices to every student, 4 wireless devices to each student on campus, which was pretty eye-opening. Now, as you can imagine, with the campus of this size, we see a huge variety of wireless clients. We need to support students, faculty, staff, vendors, contractors. Some of the clients we see are laptops, of course, Bluetooth devices, MP3 players, iPhones, gaming systems, vendors with wireless point-of-sale terminals, handheld scanners, printers, etc. All of these devices behave differently on the wireless network, so they do provide unique challenges, and they do have different requirements when actually doing configuration work on the back end. Now, we try to accommodate all clients, which becomes a huge task, But in doing so, our main goal really is to deliver dependable and optimized wireless service. We mandate that no persons on campus can deploy any 802.11 access points without proper authorization by us. By doing this, we're actually responsible for maintaining the RF spectrum and policing rogue devices that are brought in. Now, this is a daunting task and one that we have really not yet implemented a plan to conquer. I've seen as many as 500 rogue devices actually on campus, 500 rogue access points on campus. Now, to us, a rogue is considered a device that's unauthorized and it doesn't participate in our unified wireless network. But additionally, it's a device that has a potential to negatively impact the wireless service we provide for the campus. These devices actually pose a security threat as well and can allow malicious users to access network resources and personal data. But what this also does for us is it forces us to support all of the applications that are needed on campus, since individual departments are not allowed to bring in their own wireless. This includes departmental research projects, YouTube, and other streaming sites like Skype, video messaging, etc. Now, with the introduction of 802.11n, I see a growing demand for application support as well. So that's going to be a big challenge for us. Now, all of the students who live on campus, they consider this their home. They expect to have the same luxuries in their dorm rooms as they have when they go back home to mom and dad's. Now, this brings us up to the infamous gaming stations. We see a spike in channel utilization and occasionally other complaints in the evening when all students have gone back to their rooms. We've responded to some of the issues and have come to verify that many of today's gaming stations don't play by the same set of rules that other Wi-Fi equipment does. These devices don't perform a CCA, which is a clear channel assessment, before transmitting their data. Now, for those of you who don't know clear channel assessment, because essentially when a device wants to check to see if the RF medium is busy, if it's not busy, then it's going to attempt to transmit. This is due to the half-duplex nature of 802.11 communication, where only one device can speak at a time. Now, many of these gaming stations will just transmit when they want to, which causes havoc and really significantly causes data collisions and poor wireless performance. Additionally, they'll generate excessive duty cycles. A duty cycle is really the percentage of time that a channel is occupied. This is something that we still struggle with today. And so we're looking for solutions right now. We have a few ideas of how we can mitigate this, but it is something we still struggle with. Another huge challenge that we face references a previous podcast that you had with John Freeman regarding capacity planning. Now, as you can imagine, we have a large concentration of users throughout campus. Students have a variety of wireless clients, some of them legacy 802.11b only clients, some of them with BG clients, some of them with dual band 802.11a, b, and g clients. And now many of them come with 802.11n as well. Now, it becomes difficult when planning for a 2.4 gigahertz network, as the channel reuse is very limited with only 3 channels. And we try to maintain proper channel separation. The addition of 5 gigahertz radios has really significantly assisted with the channel reuse and thus accommodating additional channel capacity. However, we still work to fine-tune techniques to steer clients to the desired frequency. And we see that a lot. We see students coming on campus. Most Windows users, we actually see steering towards the BG radio on an access point, and we see Mac users going a lot more towards the A side of things, which is pretty interesting.
And just a question for you there. Do you find that happens naturally, or is there something you've done to move to band steer with your equipment?
Yeah, it actually happens naturally. And band steering is something, or a technique like band steering is something that we've implemented. It's in a pilot phase right now, but it is something that, it's just something that happens. And we're hoping that with the advent, I know there's going to be some improvements that are made to client adapters coming down the pipe, where they're going to actually have some smarts and be able to kind of make some of these decisions themselves. But in the meantime, we do have to rely on our vendor, and we have to rely on some of the techniques that they use in their own hardware and software to actually steer these clients to the desired frequency. And it's challenging when we see something like that. We have a large concentration of users in various areas throughout campus, and we really do. We have the same WLAN, the same SSID turned on both radios, basically the same network, but we see just so many clients preferring one frequency to another, and it's challenging.
I have a free idea for you here.
Sure.
That I've used in some other university environments as well as companies. And it's kind of a social engineering little bit. All you have to do is have your 2.4 gig SSID. Say it was, what's your SSID there? Campus or student, whatever.
Right.
And then have a second SSID that's tied to the 5 gig radio that would be called student-fast. And just put the word fast behind it. You'd be amazed how many people self-move over to where they need to be. And every one of them that moves up saves a little space down the 2.4 range. So kind of a free and easy little trick there. I
like that. I think we might have to try that out over here. So really, I guess the last significant challenge that we encounter would be really performing upgrades on the network. We've gone through 5 major upgrades really in the last 2 years. And this doesn't really apply only to university. This applies to everybody, but I think is very prevalent in a university space because of the number of clients we really affect, and trying to identify downtimes, things of that nature. So each upgrade, it requires extensive testing in a development environment to streamline the upgrade process. We actually, of course, we have to test functionality and identify performance issues. And, we do risk assessment when performing these upgrades so that we can roll these out during the summer or during holiday breaks. But there are times when upgrades are needed, right away, and when they need to be expedited to accommodate new network equipment or patch vulnerabilities. Then we determine a phased upgrade to reduce network downtime as much as possible. It seems as much testing as we can actually perform, there's always some unforeseen issue when it's actually rolled out into production environment. We're never going to have a development environment that can simulate every setting that we see on campus. And so that's been a big challenge for us. We try to do, load testing. We try to do application testing. But when you actually have some of these software revisions rolled out into a production environment where you're seeing, 20, 30 access points out there and you have a couple hundred clients, it's always going to be difficult and you're always going to run into something that's unforeseen. So with that, I think, that's really going to be the gist of it. There are other things, of course, that you see on campus that we don't, that aren't going to be as significant as others. I think guest access is one of them. I know we personally don't have this challenge anymore, but I know a lot of campuses do, where they look at guests coming on campus. Should it be an open hotspot type of network? Should it be a secured network? And so I think that was really a big challenge for us for a while. We were actually having guests log in to using students' identities, which is something that we got away from very, very quickly. So we actually utilize a captive portal system. We utilize a system where each student, staff, or faculty is actually a sponsor for their guests. They'll actually create accounts for their guests. We have thresholds that are defined, but they can dictate how long an account's good for. And so that actually has some accountability. That has an accountability aspect to it and some other safeguard controls as well. So it's something that we found has been very beneficial for us.
Do you ever go back and audit those accounts?
We do. We look at we look at usage. I mean, the good thing is that network is actually segmented, of course. And so, there's really nowhere they can go. But, fortunately, we've been able to define thresholds so we don't have a student making 100 different accounts to pass out to all their friends. The duration for an account, for instance, here for student is 5 days. They can create an account in advance of up to 30 days. So yeah, it's worked out well. We built it and they sure started using it. We were unsure there for a little while if it was going to be heavily utilized, but it sure has been.
Well, I have a couple other questions for you about specific campus environments. Do you have any statistics on the ratio of ABG versus ABGN versus just BG only clients that are coming on campus? Or that you see on your network? Yeah,
we do actually. We see, well, of course, we do see a lot of mixed a lot of mixed band or dual band clients that are out there. Right now, we really, like I mentioned before, we see a lot of the Windows machines really favoring the B side, I'm sorry, favoring the 2.4 gigahertz side, and we see a lot of the Macs actually favoring the A side. So our ratio right now on campus of those machines, it's almost 50-50. We have almost as many Windows devices on campus as we do Macs on campus. So like I was telling you, we have about 8,400 wireless clients that connect today. Half of those will be Macs and the other half will be Windows devices.
Are they kind of self-move between 2, 4, and 5?
Yeah, they do. Of course, the way it is now, if the only time we ever really see Macs moving to a 2.4 is if they get on the cell boundary of an A cell, of a 5 gigahertz cell. So if they start moving, to the edge of that cell, then they'll go ahead and switch over to a 2.4. But their primary connection method, at least with the newer Macs that we see, have been going to the 5 gigahertz first.
That's great. What do you find one of the things you have in your environment, your 9 million square feet, is kind of a different physical environment than a lot of companies would have. You have open areas, old buildings built in decades ago, even the stuff that was just built last year. How did you design around those changes in the physical environment?
Yeah, we've changed our methodology for designing in a lot of different ways. A lot of the older buildings had some construction type that was not very friendly to RF. Of course, they're using steel pan flooring. They're using wire mesh in the walls. They're using a lot of these different things that really just killed RF. And so when the original network was designed, it was really designed just for BG in mind. It wasn't designed for 5 gigahertz at all. So one of the things that we're having to do is revisit some of those areas and actually fill in with more access points that are only on 5 gigahertz. With the newer buildings, we are seeing that they are a lot more friendly to RF. Right now, we actually use predictive design in a lot of our new construction. Of course, anything that hasn't been built yet is going to be a predictive design. But even new construction that hasn't had any wireless at all, we've been going to a third party that utilizes tools. We mandate that any third party we utilize has to use the Motorola, the Wireless Valley product. And so we've had great luck with that so far. We're pretty interested to see how that's going to work, predictive design, when it comes to designing for 802.11n. But definitely for the 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz, we've found that the new designs have actually worked out very well for us.
So the predictive versus the post-install analysis comes out pretty close?
It does. Yep, it has been.
Good. Do you also cover the open campus areas in between the buildings?
No, we don't have any intended open. Of course, there's always bleed through going out, that we have. There have been some designs that I've seen on campus that I actually wasn't part of. This is when the network first came up, but where they have intended wireless coverage coming from within the building. So it's basically bleed through. For instance, our football stadium is actually the one area on campus where we actually have external antennas. So we're not using any kind of mesh at this point or any kind of wireless coverage that's intended for outdoor other than around our stadium. And with things like that, we're using patch antennas. We have access points mounted inside the facility, and we're coring through the walls and actually placing patch antennas. And those really accommodate like our point of sale vendors. They accommodate our ticket scanners when people come into the stadium, things like that. But that is one thing that's on the horizon. One thing that we've talked about is looking to actually get some sort of outdoor solution, because right now we have our police department is actually looking to take advantage of our Wi-Fi. Right now they use a solution that's not it's a cellular-based solution, but they're looking for something that will utilize our Wi-Fi so they can drive around their patrol cars and actually get dynamic updates and be able to send and receive traffic data dynamically.
Are you also, do you have students asking for support for things like voice over IP, video, or doing BitTorrent kind of things?
They do, and we do have a lot of that blocked. Some of the voice over IP, of course, things like Skype or we actually will have open. But as far as a dedicated voice over IP solution, we don't really support that yet. And it's something we've talked about. It's something that there's not a huge need for right now, because like I said, Skype is probably, as far as voice over IP goes, Skype is probably the number one used application by students right now, and it is supported.
Well, one of the things I noticed about your network, you said you had 2,300 APs and 8,400 clients a day.
Yes,
that's a pretty decent ratio.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, the way that the university is laid out, I mean, of course, it's 9 million square feet, but we have numerous towers on campus. So that 9 million square feet actually doesn't take into account some of the towers that we have that are, 10, 14 stories high, which is pretty interesting. But I did find that there are definitely some areas on campus that I think were overdeveloped. And I think the thought process there was, of course, to accommodate, highly populated areas and to plan for capacity. But I'm noticing that they are overdeveloped. It's not a picocell type of environment. And of course, especially when you're using 2.4 gigahertz, it's just really not the best idea to have such a high concentration of access points into certain areas. So we're going back and revisiting. And when we do the refresh for 802.11n access points, I think we're going to wind up redesigning definitely, certain areas on campus where we have this large concentration of APs.
So what kind of errors are you finding statistics-wise across your network that, the number one thing that you try to track down and fix?
Well, it all, I think, is just, it's layer one type of stuff. We see just a lot of rogue devices out there. We run into so many, whether it be intentional or unintentional. We see people bringing in their own access points when they're not supposed to. We see devices like 2.4, or even 5 gigahertz cordless phones that they're bringing into their rooms. So the errors we see really have a lot to do with they're caused by layer one type interference. And so it's something, it's a full-time job, something we don't really have the manpower to do right now. But we try to get, we're looking at solutions to mitigate something like that.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Max. Appreciate learning a little bit more about the challenges that admins face in a university environment. Is there anything else you'd like to conclude with?
I think we covered everything that I had on my list. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you inviting me to join the podcast.
Well, I'm glad you could share your expertise with us today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Keith.
Interesting facts, little-known tidbits, things you might not have known, short little bits to set your mind a-reeling.
So one thing that I think is kind of interesting is a perception in the industry concerning 802.11n and multiple input, multiple outputs use of multipath. And the perception is that any multipath is useful to MIMO. And that's not exactly true. Although multipath is useful to multiple in, multiple out, the problem is that the best advantage is realized by 802.11n systems that can gain access to uncorrelated multipath as opposed to correlated multipath. In order to get uncorrelated multipath, you have to have separation between the antennas, and that produces individual spatial streams. So just having antennas that are receiving the same spatial stream doesn't give you the advantages that you would get if you can separate those out. The ways that you can separate the spatial streams and create uncorrelated multipath are to split the antennas apart by factors of half wavelength distances, and also to create obstructions that result in a non-line of sight type of a connection. The problem with the non-line of sight connections is that usually is going to reduce the signal to noise ratios, which is going to have an adverse effect. So just keep that in mind. Not all multipath is advantageous to MIMO.
Elevator speech. Our guests have just 2 minutes to tell us all about their product or service offering. Ready, set, go.
All right. Well, my name's Marcus Burton. I'm the Director of Product Development for CWNP. CWNP is a company that does industry standard vendor neutral certification as well as some consulting on the side. CWNP stands for Certified Wireless Network Professional. And it's wireless LAN, enterprise wireless LAN network certification. So we have certification exams as well as training content related to those exams for enterprise wireless LAN professionals. So CWNP.com, you can go there. We have a lot of free resources, white papers, great forum just to discuss different topics, and then usually weekly blogs, sometimes more frequent, sometimes less frequent. And if you already know the company, then you know our product lines, but sparing the details, we've got some exciting things coming up in 2010, some new products, some new things going on around the company.
Hey, being a professional means more than just knowing the technical. Now it's time to soften up and talk about the non-techie side for a minute. Slow down, put your feet up, and listen up to these items to help you on the professional side. Enjoy.
Hello again, this is Keith Parsons, and today's soft skills section, we've brought in Derek Sisterhen. Derek is the lead financial coach of Lukas Coaching, and today we'll be talking about 3 steps to get out of a financial rut. Derek, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Keith. I appreciate it. When we were talking about this prior to coming on here, I was really thinking about it. You know, I've always wondered what could we do to maybe narrow it down so there's just one step, one key, one thing that we have to do to make things better. And sorry, everybody, I had to stick with 3. But believe me, I trimmed it down. It used to be 50. Imagine that. 50 steps out of a financial rut. That would not sound very fun.
Well, 3 sounds like it'll fit in our time slot a little easier, too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So 3 works. Yeah, we'll stick with 3. It's really kind of interesting when I'm working with folks on establishing this process, these stepping stones to go from point A to point B, and point A being not what we want, not ideal, not desirable, because maybe we're stuck in debt. Maybe we have no real understanding of how we're spending all of our money. And it's just disappearing. We get to the end of the month and we say, oh my goodness, there's too much month at the end of the money. Those kinds of things. We start there. That's our point A. How are we going to get to point B? And I feel like I've done a decent job of boiling it down to these 3 steps out of that kind of a rut. The first step is, I hope it doesn't come across as too cliche, and I definitely don't want to underestimate the power here, but you actually have to set some goals. And let's make sure we determine what the distinction is between a goal and, let's say, a resolution or a dream or something like that. A goal is taking an objective that is very worthwhile and assigning a timeline for completion and a plan of action. Now, that sounds uncomfortable because it's so much easier to start January 1st and say, you know what, I resolve to pay off some debt. I resolve to save some money. I resolve to do these things. But here's what's really interesting. The studies are showing us that only about 40% of people set New Year's resolutions anymore. And by the time we hit December, 78% of people haven't followed through with them. And it's because we say, yeah, I want to pay off some debt. Yeah, you know what? I'd like to save some money because life would definitely be less stressful and more stable with that debt gone and the savings in place. But we don't ever assign a timeline for completion, nor do we have any sort of plan of action for accomplishing that goal. But what are those objectives? What matters to you? Is it paying off that credit card that you've had since you were in college? You know, you got the free t-shirt and then you also signed up for this ultra high interest rate roller coaster ride to go on, right? Maybe that's it. Maybe we need to pay that thing off. Maybe it's some lingering medical bills. I meet a lot of people that have these medical bills that, you know, it's $200 here, $150 there. They're like big mosquitoes. We can get those mosquitoes out of your life. Things are going to feel a whole lot better. Maybe it's putting some savings in place. We're going to talk about savings in a couple of minutes. It could be any of these things. We have to identify what they are. All right, well, let's say it's paying off some debt. How are we going to do that? Well, it's going to require that you pay extra money on each of those debts over and above the minimum. So that's part of the plan of action here. Well, we got to take that a step further. What now can we do to generate extra income to put on that debt? Well, it's going to come down to a very simple equation. It's either increase our income or decrease our expenses. Income minus outgo. Pretty easy. Now, sometimes we have to take a real concerted look at our expenses and we realize, you know what? If I am able to cut back a little bit, say 10% across the board, if I cut back just a little bit, I'm going to be able to put a whole lot more money onto that debt. So when we have this income minus outgo and we start to see that we could potentially be increasing our income or decreasing our expenses, it's going to allow that cash flow to then put onto this other debt. And if we were to decrease our expenses by 10% across the board, what would that allow us to do as far as paying things off? That's all part of a plan of action. But there's that other piece, that timeline for completion. When are you going to do this by? Now, this is where we have a difficult time in our culture because I'm starting to skirt around an issue here called accountability. And a lot of people don't like accountability because that means that I have to actually do what I set out to do. And most people get uncomfortable with that because we know that if we don't have anybody holding us accountable, we can change the rules anytime we want. And as soon as we put a timeline for completion in place, that adds a layer of accountability. Because if I say that I want to pay something off or save a certain amount of money within the next 2 to 3 months, and then I don't do it, that's not very comfortable. Because I knew that if I had my plan of action in place, I was very likely to actually achieve that goal in that timeline of completion. And yet I didn't follow through. So that timeline for completion is important. It's that extra little flame that we can put underneath of our feet. So we've got our feet to the fire. We can start running towards our financial goals. So we set these goals, and that's the first step. We have to know what the targets are. Zig Ziglar says if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. And until we know what those targets are, we have no way to create the game plan, the long-term strategy that's going to carry us there. Well, that takes me to the second step. The strategy that's going to take you there is the B word. And I know everybody gets all upset about this. It's the budget. We'll call it a spending plan, if that makes you feel better, if that makes a little more glass half full kind of attitude for you. The spending plan or the budget is where we control what's going on in our world. John Maxwell says a budget is telling your money where to go so you don't have to wonder where it went. And that's where a lot of us reside. We live in this, thank God it's Friday, oh God it's Monday mentality because we get paid, we spend the money, and now we start to say, how much longer till we get paid again? We get ourselves all wrapped up into this real anxious state of being, and that's not a very healthy way to live. And we can avoid that if we choose to. So a budget is telling our money where to go. Now, this is the piece that differentiates a true working spending plan or budget from what we perceive a budget to look like. Some of us, we look at budgets as though they're handcuffs or a straitjacket or a whipping post, maybe. Sometimes in some of the marriages that I've encountered, a budget is just that. It is the whipping post by which husbands and wives are beating each other over the head so that they can try to make their point, and they're not necessarily coming to that common set of goals. It's telling our money where to go. So this means that if we make a certain amount of money and we've got a certain list of expenses, we have to start actively distributing across all those expenses where that money is going to go. Now, when we do that, we want to do that before the month ever begins. No sense in getting a week into the month and deciding it's time to do a budget. No sense in getting 3 weeks into the month and starting to say, you know what, we probably should have planned things out. We want to do it before each month begins. This way we know if we go into the month and we live according to this budget that we've planned, we'll not only meet all these different expense categories that we lined up, but we'll also be able to incorporate in those goals because a part of your spending plan needs to include saving money and paying extra on debt if there's still debt in your world. So that's the importance of having a spending plan. It is the legs that takes us from where we are to where we truly want to be. And here's the interesting thing. In his book, The Millionaire Next Door, Dr. Thomas Stanley found that the vast majority of millionaires in this country budget their money. Ironic, I know. You think that they've got all this money. Why would they need the budget? Well, the truth is that they got all that money because they were budgeters. They kept good records of where they spent their money. They planned out where the dollars were going to go rather than just let them disappear, scratch their head and say, you know what? I don't understand where it went. I should probably figure this out sometime. And then keep going month to month saying that over and over again. They broke out of that cycle. They knew what it was going to take to reach their goals. So we have to have a spending plan and recognize, too, that you can have a spontaneity fund in your spending plan. A lot of folks I talk with, they get upset about this because, Derek, you know, if I'm going to have a budget, I'm not going to be able to have any fun. And that's really not the case at all. Remember, we're telling the money where to go so we don't have to wonder where it went. If we want to have some fun, let's put fun in the budget. Piece of cake. We just want to make sure that the fun doesn't erode our ability to achieve those goals that we know are very meaningful. Because here's the interesting thing. My guess is that it's not just about eliminating liability from your balance sheet. There's stress that comes with that, with being in debt. There's anxiety. For some folks, there's regret. So there's an emotional underpinning in all of this. It's a lot more than just numbers. So that's why when we control where this money goes, we tell it where it needs to go. We actively choose to identify what matters the most to us and follow through with that. So that's the second step out of a financial rut. It's having a budget that actually works, done proactively so you tell your money where to go and you don't have to wonder where it went. The third step is risk management. Now, I spent a number of years in the banking world and in different capacities, but one of the capacities was risk management. So I got to wake up every morning and over my cornflakes, I got to think about what's the worst possible thing that could happen to this bank today. Now, a lot of people don't take that same approach into their personal finances. We tend to kind of go along ignorance is bliss, right? But here's the truth. Number one, Money Magazine did a study and found that 78% of Americans will experience a major negative financial event in any given 10-year period. So it's not really a matter of if it rains, it's a matter of when it rains. So when it rains, what does your umbrella look like? Where is your umbrella? Have you lost it? When you open it up, is it all in tatters? We want to make sure that we have a good safety net underneath of us if we ever have a financial fall. So I like to start initially with a baseline starter emergency fund of something like $1,000 to $1,500. We put that in a nice plain Jane savings account or money market account. I'm not really concerned about making a tremendous amount of interest. I just want to know that this is available because I might need it tomorrow. That's all I really care about, knowing that that's there. Once I have that in place, now I can focus on the other side of risk management. The other side of risk management are those consumer liabilities on your balance sheet. So it's going to be your credit cards, it's going to be the personal loans, it's going to be the student loans, and I would even lump in there your car loans. Vehicles, by the way, are the largest assets Americans buy, and most of them finance them, that are going down in value. That's poor math. So we want to make sure that we can dump those car loans. Kiplinger's personal finance says that the average vehicle is going to lose 70% of its value in the first 4 years. So no sense in paying interest on something going down in value. So the risk management side of it is not just setting aside an emergency fund and covering your risk for life happening. It's also dumping this debt, because debt represents a liability. If we don't get out of debt, we're always going to have something sucking up our cash flow. And if we ever wind up in a job loss situation, you know what? The collectors are still going to call. So we dump the debt. It releases us with our cash flow on a monthly basis. It also will release a lot of stress and anxiety. That has a big implication for not just our own personal physiological well-being, but also our relationships. You know, money is the number one cause of divorce in this country. That's not a very good statistic. 90% of the marriages that end in the first 7 years cite money fights and money problems. Yet if we dump this debt and the burden that it represents, my guess is that those financial obligations would start to become lower and lower on the radar for marriages, and we wouldn't be getting so consumed with all these financial issues and letting them spill over into a relationship disruption sort of scenario. So there's a lot at work here. We talked about having actual goals so that you know what it is you're aiming toward. And a goal could be 30 days, but it could be just something very short and sweet. By the end of this month, I want to save $100. What is it going to take to do that? It's going to take me opening up a savings account and actually committing to putting the money aside. And my timeline for completion, 30 days. So those are the kind of goals that we can start to build in place, especially if you've never set goals, to give yourself that sense of accomplishment. You start to build enthusiasm when you reach a goal. Now, I can promise you the only way you'll make it happen is by controlling your spending on a monthly basis. No 2 months are ever the same. So to think that we can take a carbon copy approach month in and month out is really kind of naive. So when we start to create a proactive budget before each month begins, we're going to go into each month knowing exactly what we have to do to cover our basic expenses, as well as the ability to incorporate in the objectives that we're trying to accomplish over the long haul, whether it's adding more money towards our emergency savings fund or it's putting more money on our debt. And then again, that third step is that we want to look at the risks in our lives. First, there's the risk of life happening. Murphy's Law, right? If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. There's a demon out there. He lives in alternators and in hot water heaters and those kinds of things, and he's always waiting to peek up his head. So if we've got that cash set aside in emergency fund, somewhere around $1,000 to $1,500, we're able to cover a lot of those emergencies. And then we're able to launch the all-out attack to dump the consumer debt. I've never met anybody who was upset to be debt-free. And I have a feeling that it'd be a pretty sweet feeling for you to experience that as well, especially if you haven't before. So that's what we want to do. We're going to set a goal, we're going to control where we send our money, and we're going to really focus on making sure our risks have been mitigated by saving and by getting out of debt. So those are the 3 steps out of a financial rut, if that's where you find yourself today.
Well, thank you. I like that. Made nice and easy. Just 3: goals, budget, and risk management. A nice 3 steps. I'm sure there's a lot more little pieces that need to go on there as well. Some of the terms you mentioned sound a little bit like some of the things I've heard on Dave Ramsey. You guys work with Dave Ramsey's group?
Yeah, actually, Dave Ramsey's company is actually called the Lampo Group. A lot of people don't know that, but we are certified through the Lampo Group because we espouse ourselves with the same financial philosophies that Dave Ramsey does.
Great. Well, that was a nice little overview there. Any last little words of encouragement or advice, or is there a way where people who are listening can get a hold of you if they find themselves that they might want some financial coaching?
Yeah, absolutely, Keith. One thing I would say is that I'm not telling you all of these 3 steps out of a financial rut as somebody that's never been there. I've been there. My wife and I were able to pay off a substantial amount of debt after we committed to making it happen, and we were able to then get on with life and reach our savings goals and start to accomplish some of the other things that were a whole lot more worthwhile to us than continually making payments. So I've been there. I've done that. I got the T-shirt. And I can tell you it can be done, and the feeling on the other side is just incredibly awesome. Some of the resources that we've got will definitely help if you're just trying to get yourself started to get out of a financial rut. You can go over to lukascoaching.com and click on the resources tab. We've got all sorts of worksheets, goal setting tools out there that'll help you start to draw a line in the sand here of where you want to be. So we can get that sense of what it is we want to accomplish and then start creating the budget that's going to help get you there. You can also download some budget forms and make use of those things as you get yourself started. The other resource that I'll point out is PastDueRadio.com. I'm the host of that. We talk about financial goals, and we talk about financial, anything that's pertinent from a financial standpoint, whether it's simply getting on track financially with your spouse, putting together a budget, or even looking at longer term things like a sound investing plan, making sure that our insurance policies line up. Again, because we don't sell any products, we're able to be completely objective. Our only agenda, I tell people this all the time, our agenda is making sure that you succeed in your defined terms of success. I'm not going to push my idea of success on anybody. I want you to succeed in how you define it. So PastDueRadio.com is where we have our show every Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern. You can listen to all the archived shows and subscribe to the podcast there, talking about life, talking about money, and making sure that we make it count.
Well, thanks again. That's good stuff. I've been out to your site, and I'll put links in the show notes to these so they can go and find those resources that you have available on your site for free. Thanks for sharing those with us, and thanks for your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Keith.
Thanks. Bye. Well, that kind of wraps up episode number 12 of Wireless LAN Weekly. And again, if you have any comments or ideas, feel free to leave your feedback at feedback@wirelesslanprofessionals.com. We're glad you joined us here today. And our thanks goes out to Max and to Derek for their help in today's episodes. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.
Wireless LAN Weekly, a podcast focused on the needs of wireless LAN professionals. We look forward to your feedback. Please leave your comments at the bottom of the show notes, or email feedback on the show can be sent to feedback@wirelesslanprofessionals.com. If you'd like to leave a voicemail feedback, just call 24/7 and leave a message at 1-801-481-9018. Until next time, this has been another production of wirelesslanprofessionals.com, a place to educate, inform, entertain, and inspire.